Welcome to the Fantasy Football TokeNCast. I'm your host, Tuna.
And I'm your co-host, Travis. We welcome you to our little place of venting about fantasy football.
We'll be bringing you week-to-week updates on players, teams, and all things token ring going on. This episode is going to be short and sweet. We're talking basics, our league size, formats, and value of position to position.
As you all know, we play in a 12-team, half PPR, single optional keeper league. What this means is you can keep a player for your first round pick, but you do not have to. It's kind of hard to explain. Essentially, if you don't keep anybody, you will be picking at the end of the first round. Our format is a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 1 wide receiver, 1 tight end, with a running back, wide receiver flex, and a wide receiver tight end flex. Other than that, it's pretty standard. But what this does is places the running back values pretty high in comparison to the other positions, simply because you can play more of them.
And the running back position is pretty high anywhere you go because there are some running backs that essentially double as wide receivers.
Like Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley.
Speaking of Todd Gurley, he was the number 1 running back last year. And next week, when we actually do our first episode, we're going to have the number 1 person in our league, probably of all time, Ricky, and he's probably the greatest fantasy football player that I know. He's definitely better than Travis.
Hopefully he'll be a little more used to talking on the mic, because obviously you can see that we aren't. This is our first ever attempt at a podcast, so it's going to be a little rough. Y'all have to stick with us for a little bit. We're trying to put this together so that everybody can just get engaged in our league. Like we have a few people who post on Facebook. Yeah, that's cool. But the only one that talked any mess last year was Cody. That's it. Like nobody.
And I'm coming back for you again this year.
Nobody is going. Is like. It seems like y'all are just going through the motions.
Give Sarah her props though. She's very G rated.
That's true.
But she talks a lot of shit, and she talked a lot of shit last year. And tip of the hat to her for sure.
That doesn't mean she's gonna win.
And Brian is very defensive, but you have to poke him to get him to say anything.
He's like a bear.
And Keith's a meme at this point. With how many times he's had great drafts with great teams and made every move right, and his team just falls apart. You can relate to that completely.
Yes, I can. I've had David Johnson go down 2 years in a row, and 1 year he went down in the freaking championship, which is such stupid crap.
But you're still a believer.
I am a believer in David Johnson. I think he's going to do well this year.
I've won 2. I'm a back-to-back. I'm the only one in the league that's back-to-back. But I did it back when we were 8-team, and none of us knew anything, and I just shit on everyone. But now that we've been 12 ever since we were an 8-team, we were a 10-team. But ever since we've moved to 12, and we've all been, it's like every year everyone just becomes a fucking ESPN analyst or something. It's ridiculous how good everyone's gotten at this point. Now that we're 6, 7, 8 seasons in to Token League.
And that's another reason that we're doing the podcast, is because not everybody is like, I would say, Aaron doesn't know that much about fantasy football, and he doesn't follow that much football, so
he also has a big toilet statue because he's a big toilet statue haver.
That's right. And we're trying to make this podcast mainly for the people who need to know about fantasy football, like who want to know what strategies you can go into a draft with, what not to do, because there's sometimes you'll see people who will draft literally every position that they need. Like they draft a quarterback because they know they
in the 9th round, 10th round.
Right, because they know that they can only start one, and they might want to get it before they start filling up their bench. Well, if you've played fantasy football, you know that injuries happen, and if you don't have a deep bench, you will not survive the entire year.
I actually heard about a lady who is in a league that's her strategy every year for 7 years in a row was that's how she drafts. She drafts her every position as she needs all the way down, and then once she has all of her positions filled, then she starts filling her bench, and her bench is always weak. But she's won 5 or 6 out of the 7 seasons in a row. It's some anomaly, and it's not because the people in her league are shitty, according to the guy who was reading the email. It was because it's just some anomaly, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is none of her players got hurt. Like, if one of her starting, like, say her starting quarterback got hurt, or her number one running back or her number one receiver got hurt that year, she would be screwed. Whereas somebody like me, last year, I had my number one running back and my number one wide receiver go down in the first 3 weeks, and I still came back to be 7-5. Now, I lost 5 in a row, whatever. It happens. It kicks you out of the playoffs, and then you get all sad. But I still came back to be 7-5.
Hey, that's something you can hang your hat on. I mean, I was in the playoffs last year, but
I don't have the toilet.
yeah, we don't have the toilet. That would be Aaron.
We're gonna keep hammering you, Aaron.
So what about handcuffs? I mean, like, should we talk handcuffs today?
I mean, we could. We
keep talking about drafting, and it's like, when do you draft your handcuffs? Do you draft handcuffs? Do you worry about handcuffs? Because after 4 or 5 seasons of even knowing what that is, I don't even care anymore. I don't really care to go for handcuffs, honestly. I would rather take a shot on a rookie or another starting running back or something other.
Yeah, and a handcuff, so the fantasy footballers who is the inspiration for this podcast, they say there are handcuffs and then there are handcuffs, right? Because there are some players like Tevin Coleman, for example, who, if the number one running back goes down, if Devontae Freeman goes down, he's going to be a number one running back for the rest of the year. It's just going to happen because he's going to get that much work. Whereas like in Miami, if Kenyon Drake goes down, then there's going to be at least 2 people there that are going to get the ball. So you're never going to know who's going to go off one week. But if you know that the person in front of him if he goes down, then this person is going to be a really good, or he's going to get all of the work, then that's the kind of handcuff that I want.
Now, are we reaching for these players? Are we trying to go out of our way to get these Kenyon Drakes?
So for a handcuff, it's not a handcuff if you take him in the 5th round. That's one of your starting running backs. So you can't call that a handcuff. And that's about where Tevin Coleman's going to go. So essentially, you're drafting your number 2 or number 3 running back at that point. You're not drafting your handcuff for your number 1. So if you have Devontae Freeman in the 2nd round and you draft Tevin Coleman in the 5th round, that's probably a bad thing to do, because if you play both of those in 1 week, you probably are only getting half the points. Right. Or I guess you're going to get the whole points, but it's going to be, you're going to take up 2 slots for 1 running back, essentially. Like a handcuff, to me, I consider after the 9th round, that'll be a handcuff. And normally, after the 9th round, I want to go for upside rookies like Ronald Jones or
kickers.
Yeah, I don't draft kickers before the 2nd to the last round.
Maybe don't even draft kickers.
Yeah, if that's another thing.
If it's in your league rules.
Right. If your league rules don't make you draft a kicker in a defense, then you don't have to. Now it's a lot of people's strategy that they draft the best defense because they don't want to have to worry about it, and I can understand that. But the best defense last year doesn't always mean that it's going to be the best defense this year. And there's no way to tell with defense because there's so many interchanging parts, like coach matters. If they have even like a second cornerback that left, like a they have a number one cornerback that stayed and then their second cornerback left, that could severely hurt their defense, because then all the other team's gonna do is throw it to their number two wide receiver every time, and there's nothing that they can do about it because that person sucks on the other side of the field.
Something I've noticed with Ricky's teams that are winners is he picks up good defenses and good kickers. Like, he doesn't draft like in retarded spots, but he picks them up. Like he towards the end of the draft, he's looking for a good kicker and a good defense, and he'll end up riding him for the whole season most of the time.
Right, and he doesn't draft him too early. Like, he'll draft him maybe a round early, or maybe 2 rounds early if it's somebody like Justin Tucker.
But then you got someone like Brian, who I feel like he wouldn't even pick up a defense if he didn't have to, you know.
I'm the same way. If I didn't have to pick up a defense, I probably wouldn't, unless I could get, like, so I'm a Steelers fan, as you all know. If I could get the Steelers and they were good that year, and if I had to draft them earlier, I probably would, because they're my team. I want to root for my team.
Right. I'm a Buffalo fan. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. I'm a Buffalo fan, and Shady, he's a good guy.
Calling it now. Shady's innocent. This has been our introductory episode, so we're not going to really go into stats or breakdowns of players just yet, but stay tuned in a couple of weeks for our next episode, our first real episode. And we'll talk about our rankings, and we'll hopefully have Ricky in, and it'll actually be more of a show. Like he said before, we're just trying to figure this out, like if we want to do this or how we want to do this.
If it'll even work, really.
Right. So let us know if this is something you want us to keep doing, or if you want us to actually flesh this idea out, or if this is already something you're gonna just let us know, because we'll do something else with our goddamn time.
That's right. We don't need to be here for 30 minutes just talking into a mic for no reason.
Right. But anyway, that's this week's episode. So until next time, form the token ring.
This has been a Token Ring production. All music brought to you by Richie Flow. You can find his beats at SoundCloud, Richie Flow Beats.